Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. In today's video, I'm going to be going over my top 7 most buff characters for patch 1.1 due to the mechanics change. So, what do I mean by a mechanics change? In patch 1.0, enemies past level 50 would scale, would have increased effect resistance. And now at patch 1.1, MiHoYo actually reduced the scaling by a significant amount. Effectively, what ended up happening is that the enemies in Forgotten Hall pretty much went from 50% effect resistance in the later Forgotten Halls down to about 40% effect hit resistance. And this actually has a lot of rippling effects across the entire spectrum when it comes to a lot of different characters that apply effects. But wait, if you're looking for a last-minute perfect Father's Day gift, then I recommend the Ridge Wallet. As a dad myself, I've been using my Ridge Wallet for over a year now, and it was like upgrading from free-to-play inventory space to premium inventory. Hold up to 12 cards, plenty of cash, all while maintaining a super slim profile, unlike old, bulky, floppy wallets. There's over 30 cosmetic skins to choose from, including carbon fiber, burnt titanium, and my personal favorite, the Forged Ember, which has also just released the beautiful leather series. It's perfect for combining the familiar feel of leather and the pragmatism of the modern design of the Ridge Wallet. It also has RFID blocking technology to stop digital pickpocketers, and even optional AirTag attachments so you don't lose your wallet. There's also Ridge key cases, which I've also been using for over a year now, which secretly holds 1 to 6 keys and provides amazing crowd control to keep them all together. Get up to 30% off when you order both. Ridge has over 3 million customers and over 50,000 5-star reviews. You can even get a full refund in 99 days with a lifetime warranty. So what are you waiting for? Ridge.com/IWinToLose to get your dad, your grandpa, or even yourself the perfect Father's Day gift with the Ridge Wallet. Just go to Ridge.com/IWinToLose to get a nice juicy discount. Huge thanks to Ridge Wallet for sponsoring today's video. Without further ado, let's start with the number 7 most buff character in my opinion, and that is actually Fire Trailblazer. You might be surprised to see Fire Trailblazer on this list, but Fire Trailblazer actually has a perfect, quote-unquote, perfect taunt with a 100% base chance to taunt. However, before patch 1.1, you needed 100% effect hit rate in order to actually make this 100% chance to taunt, and that's because, we have to plug it into this formula, which will pop out the proper amount of effect hit rate that you actually need. With that in mind, now in patch 1.1, you only need 67% in order to reach a perfect taunt with Fire Trailblazer. As such, it makes it much more viable to really focus on defense main stats and then effect hit rate substats if you still want that perfect taunt. And let's say, for example, you're not really doing that, you just have about 20% effect hit rate on Fire Trailblazer. That's okay, because at 20% effect hit rate, you're still going to have a 72% chance to perfectly taunt the enemy in comparison to just 60% prior to patch 1.1. So this is, in my opinion, a very nice quality of life buff for Fire Trailblazer, because when you need that taunt to actually activate, you want it to activate in order to save some potentially much more vulnerable characters. And in my opinion, this is a very nice buff for Fire Trailblazer. Now the character that I think deserves the number 6 spot on this list is actually Gepard. So why Gepard? Gepard actually has a freeze on his skill. This freeze at Eidolon 0 has a 65% chance, which isn't great. And we can see here in this chart, prior to 1.1, you needed a whopping 208%, and after 1.1, you need 156% effect hit rate to get a 100% chance to freeze. Obviously, neither of those are great, but that still makes you much more likely to actually freeze the enemy with a much more reasonable amount of effect hit rate. However, that's not all. If you do get his Eidolon 1, which is indeed accessible to many free-to-plays over a long time if you lose your 50-50s to Gepard, unfortunately, but then that will bounce up his skills freeze application to 100%. And at 100%, similar to Fire Trailblazer, you now only need 67% effect hit rate in order to apply freeze every single time to an enemy that's not innately resistant to freeze. So we can see that this is definitely a very nice buff to Japard, and you guys should know how powerful Freeze is. So yeah, very, very nice buff to our boy Japard. Now, number 5 on this list might be a little interesting, but it's actually our adorable little Hook. And why is this? Because Hook actually has quite a few abilities that do additional damage to enemies that are burned. For example, we can see her talent, where when she attacks an enemy that is burned, she will do additional fire damage and generate 5 energy. And we can see here that her skill applies burn to the enemy. However, being a crit scaling character that Hook is, it was pretty, difficult to build her with a reasonable amount of effect hit rate as well as with crit. However, now just having a little bit of hit rate will take you a very long way with Hook and will allow you to apply burn much more reliably. Back in the day, you would need 100% in order to get 100% burn rate, and now, well, you can go for just 67% effect hit rate if you want 100% chance to burn the enemy. So yeah, even at 0% effect hit rate, which is not really realistic, you're very likely to have some effect hit rate on your subsets, but let's say you're at 0%, then you would have only a 50% chance to burn the enemy prior to patch 1.1, and after patch 1.1, it is now a 60% chance to burn the enemy. So this is a very, very nice buff to Hook's consistency in order for her to do a lot more additional damage thanks to her talent as well as the burn itself. Number 4 on this list is Pella. And the reason why for Pella should honestly be pretty straightforward and obvious, but let's start with her traces, and in particular, it's her ultimate. Now she needs significantly less effect hit rate, especially in combination with her, trace ability that gives a 10% effect hit rate to all allies. So both this passive is even more valuable thanks to the buff, as well as her ultimate being very, very useful for applying defense down with a 100% base chance. So similar to Fire Trailblazer and other abilities with 100% base chance, this takes her effect hit rate requirement down to 67% from 100%. And just a bit of reference, this means you can stack a lot more damage on Pella instead of just trying to squeeze out as much effect hit rate as possible, because this will free up, for example, even your main stat on your body to a crit body, which will absolutely hugely increase Pella's damage output. And on top of this, Pella is going to frequently use the resolution shines as pearls of sweat, and this will absolutely increase the consistency of the ensnared application that this light cone provides. So in a way, this is kind of like a double buff for Pella, thanks to the fact that this light cone was also buffed, and the fact that now she can drop a lot of effect hit rate for crit and various other offensive stats in order to do a lot more damage. Number 3 on this list is Serval. So this should be pretty obvious because Serval really wants to apply shock on the enemy. And when you apply shock on the enemy, Serval's entire kit revolves around pretty much, all that. Pretty much revolves around the enemies being shocked. She does a lot more damage with her talent. The shock itself does damage. However, back in the day, oftentimes you wouldn't apply shock with her skill, which would be quite frustrating. And even with, let's say you had her idol on, which allows the ultimate to apply the shock, sometimes that wouldn't apply as well. And once that happens, your Serval is pretty much dead weight and does very little for the team. However, now you can have a very, very attainable just 67% effect hit rate. And similar to Pella, this will also allow you to sacrifice the previous effect hit rate that you needed, which was 100%, for more crit and offensive stats in order for Serval to do a lot more damage. So I think this is a very, very nice buff for Serval due to both consistency reasons as well as being able to replace effect hit rate with more offensive stats. So the second most buff character, in my opinion, is Welt. And Welt, as we know, is also a Nihility character. You can kind of see who this patch really favored. Definitely quite a few Nihility characters. And the reason why is that now you have a very, very, very good chance of applying slow on pretty much any enemy that you hit. with his, let's see, right here with his skill. And since his skill spreads out, this means that you can much more reliably and consistently apply slow or, reduce the enemy speed by 10% to multiple enemies, whereas back in the day, perhaps only one stray hit an enemy on the side, and now, that enemy didn't get slowed. But thanks to this, you will have a much, much higher chance. On top of that, his ultimates will now have a 100% chance to imprison the enemy with just 67% effect hit rate. So similar to the other characters, you can now sacrifice effect hit rate stats for more offensive stats, which will indeed make Welt do more damage. And Welt, surprisingly, can do a reasonable amount of damage. So this is going to be a very, very nice buff for him. On top of that, similar to Pella, Welt can also absolutely use the Resolution Shines as Pearls of Sweat, which is going to be another nice buff for him to have this activate much more consistently than it did back in the day. So overall, a very nice buff to Welt. Welt was already a really good character, but honestly, this makes him even better with the ability to obtain much more reasonable amounts of effect hit rate in comparison to before. So before we get to our biggest winner, let's talk about some honorable mentions on this list. Starting with actually Silverwolf, which is an interesting one because she wasn't actually buffed because she wasn't released prior to 1.0, but still her kit would have been a lot more different had it not been for patch 1.1's buff. And as we can see, the previous effect hit rate values were just absolutely obscene. Well, not obscene, but you need a lot of them in order for her to reliably and consistently apply her debuffs. And obviously, we really, really want Silverwolf to reliably and consistently apply her debuffs. In particular, her skill is very, very important in order to apply the weakness, resistance, shred, and all that stuff to the enemy. Similar to the other characters, you can now drop a lot of effect hit rate for additional damage. Now, the next character on this list might be a little surprising, but I actually think it's Asta. Asta deserves an honorable mention because she has an 80% chance with her basic attack to burn the enemies. And burning the enemies is very useful for when you pair her with a character like Hook, and I do think Asta is a great support for a character like Hook. As such, Asta can now be the one that really focuses on burning the enemy instead of Hook, and therefore Hook can stack even more offensive stats instead of any effect hit rate. So yeah, this is a small but nice buff for Asta supporting Hook. The next character that deserves an honorable mention is Dan Heng. So Dan Heng's skill slows the enemy, and prior to this, you still don't build Dan Heng with effect hit rate, but now stray amounts of effect hit rate will take his slow chance up to a much, much more consistent application rate in comparison to before. And the reason why he wants slow on the enemy is because his ultimate will do a lot more damage thanks to slow being on the enemy. So yeah, very nice way for him to kind of support himself and a nice little buff to his consistency. And last but not least on the honorable mentions is March 7. So March 7's ultimate, being able to freeze more consistently against all the enemies, is going to be absolutely huge for her. And it is a pretty low 50% base chance, so you won't really go for like 100% freeze rate on her ultimate. Yeah, she has, I believe, a trace that brings it up to 65%, which is still a low chance to freeze. There it is. But still, you're going to see a lot more freezes, a lot more consistently with March 7's ultimate in comparison to before. So, in my opinion, the number one most buff character is actually Sampo. So Sampo had some consistency issues, especially in the harder levels of the Forgotten Hall Memory of Chaos. And this is because of his rather low application rate of 65% base chance. But now let's say you have a very reasonable 100% effect hit rate, you will have a 78% chance for him to apply Wind Shear, which is a lot more reliable than the previous 65%. We pretty much went from a 1 in 3 chance to fail to almost a 1 in 4/1 in 5 chance to fail, which is definitely going to help him stack up those wind shears on the enemy a lot more consistently and a lot more quickly. I know in like a super long battle, it typically doesn't matter as much for Sampo, but you want those stacks to be on the enemy as fast as possible, and that's what this buff does for him. And similar to the other characters, you can always squeeze out more damage thanks to this buff, as well as maintain the same previous chances you had to apply Wind Shear, and by replacing his stats with some more offensive stats. And also we have one more character to mention that is another unreleased character, but I think Kafka will be majorly buffed thanks to all of this. Because Kafka, you know, is a very dot focused character. So yeah, didn't mean to steal the glory from Sampo, but it's absolutely worth mentioning Kafka in the future. So yeah, what do you think about my top 7 list of most buff characters by the effect resistance change of patch 1.1? Let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to check out Ridge Wallet, the sponsor for today's video, down in the comments below if you are in need of a last-minute Father's Day gift. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Want to Lose, signing out.